George Russell's 1:11.567 lap in SQ3 at Zandvoort beat Lando Norris by exactly 0.04 of a second to claim sprint pole. By the end of this video, you will understand precisely how he unlocked that specific performance when it mattered most. He failed to set the benchmark in either SQ1 or SQ2 before that final flying lap. We are going to trace the exact sequence of events that turned a difficult summer break into a precision strike against the 2026 grid. But there is one critical piece of this puzzle that remains stubbornly out of reach right now. Despite analyzing every available timing sheet and post-session reaction, we still do not have a confirmed telemetry trace. No setup change has been verified to mechanically explain why the Mercedes suddenly found 0.3 of pace in the final minutes. The rest of the field stagnated while Russell improved, leaving us with a result that defies the standard technical narrative. This is the tension we need to resolve today, because without that mechanical answer, we are left staring at a statistical anomaly. It challenges everything we thought we knew about the current competitive balance under the new regulations. Russell himself admitted to Formula One. Calm that his confidence wasn't exactly at its highest before the session began. Yet he delivered a lap that left championship leader Kimi Antonelli roughly 0.2 adrift in P5 with a 1:11.794. So what changed in those final moments between the garage and turn 1? Was it a sudden shift in wind direction that favored only the Mercedes aero platform? Or did Russell simply extract something from the car that even his own engineers hadn't modeled in simulation? The data shows the gap clearly, but the cause remains hidden behind a wall of unconfirmed variables. He knew it. Time ran out. One shot left. Think about the sheer pressure of that moment after a first lap retirement in Belgium. That was followed by a disappointing P7 at the Hungaroring just 1 week later. Sky Sports noted these results made for a tough end to the first half of the year. Now picture him sitting in the cockpit knowing Lewis Hamilton is second in the championship. Hamilton sits 50 points behind Antonelli while Russell himself trails Hamilton by another 9 points. Every single thousandth of a second on that final flying lap carried the weight of a title fight. That opportunity could easily slip away if he failed to capitalize on this narrow window. The clock was ticking down in SQ3 as the track continued to evolve around him. His teammate was already compromised by floor damage from an earlier excursion at the penultimate corner. The margin was razor thin against a McLaren that looked incredibly fast all weekend. Norris was only 0.41 seconds slower than Russell's benchmark time. Charles Leclerc sat just 0.0014 seconds behind Norris in third place. Oscar Piastri was within 0.044 seconds of his teammate in fourth. In a field this tightly bunched under the volatile 2026 rule cycle, finding 400ths requires more than just clean air. It demands a convergence of driver confidence and mechanical grip that Russell described specifically to Formula One. Calm. He said the lap felt really good and it all came together nicely when it mattered. Notice the phrasing there because he acknowledged the McLarens and Ferraris both looked quick, yet he still found that extra reserve of pace precisely when the others couldn't match him. That discrepancy is the heartbeat of this story and forces us to ask a difficult question. We must determine whether this was a repeatable technical breakthrough or a fleeting moment of individual brilliance. That specific benchmark of 1:11.5 size 7 did not exist on the timing screens until the absolute final moments of the session. Russell was nowhere near the top of the order during the earlier segments. He spent SQ1 and SQ2 watching other drivers define the pace while he remained conspicuously absent from the headline times. This deliberate pacing strategy stands in stark contrast to the usual approach where teams chase early track position. Most drivers in this new 2026 regulation cycle want to bank a safe lap immediately to avoid traffic complications. Russell took the opposite path by holding back his ultimate performance until the checkered flag was nearly waving. The risk involved in the strategy is enormous because any mistake in that final run leaves you with nothing to show for it. Pace arrived late, risk paid off, silence followed. We have to consider what this delayed delivery tells us about Mercedes' operational mindset at Zandvoort. They clearly had data suggesting the car would perform better as conditions evolved rather than immediately out of the garage. This contradicts the typical sprint qualifying format where sessions are short and unforgiving. Formula One, calm, framed this entire sequence as Russell charging to pole ahead of Norris in a very close session. That word charging implies an aggressive escalation of effort that wasn't visible earlier. It suggests the team was managing tire temperatures or aerodynamic sensitivity in a way that required patience. We know Antonelli suffered floor damage at the penultimate corner during SQ1, which compromised his entire weekend trajectory. Russell avoided such incidents, but also avoided setting early markers that might have tipped his hand to rivals. So, where does that leave our understanding of his actual single-lap potential? The gap to Norris was precisely 0.41 seconds, which is less than half a tenth in a sprint format. In previous seasons, under different rules, that margin might represent a comfortable cushion. Under the volatile 2026 chassis and power unit regulations, it represents the difference between perfection and second place. Norris himself was only 0.114 seconds ahead of Leclerc in third. Piastri sat just 0.144 seconds behind his McLaren teammate in fourth. These margins are so compressed that Russell's failure to lead earlier sessions makes his final dominance even more puzzling. If the car was capable of a 1-1-1, 5x7, why didn't it show that pace when the track was fresher in SQ1? The answer likely lies in the unique characteristics of Circuit Zandvoort itself. Russell told Formula 1, calm post-session, that it is a circuit he really loves and needs a lot of commitment. Commitment here means trusting the aerodynamic platform through high-speed banking where downforce efficiency matters most. Perhaps the Mercedes requires a specific thermal window that only opens after multiple warm-up phases. Maybe the drivers needed to build personal confidence through incremental laps before attacking the limit. This brings us back to the human element that no telemetry can fully capture. Sky Sports emphasized that both Antonelli and Hamilton were on the back foot relative to this pole position. Their inability to match Russell's late surge highlights how individual driver adaptation can outweigh raw machinery in this era. Hamilton sits 50 points behind championship leader Antonelli. Russell trails Hamilton by 9 more points. Every qualifying result reshapes that mathematical landscape. By saving his best for last, Russell maximized his psychological impact on title rivals who now face him from behind on the sprint grid. The RFIA news channel corroborated this exact top order, confirming no timing errors affected the result. What remains unconfirmed is whether Mercedes can replicate this late session magic in future sprints. Without verified telemetry showing setup changes between SQ2 and SQ3, we cannot distinguish sustainable development from circumstantial brilliance. The lap exists as a fact. The method remains a variable we must continue to investigate through indirect evidence. This performance marked a sharp bounce back for Russell after a first-lap retirement in Belgium and a P7 finish in Hungary, a rough patch where he admitted his confidence wasn't exactly at its highest. That admission to Formula 1. Calm is critical context because it reframes the Zandvoort pole as a psychological victory as much as a technical one. Drivers rarely speak openly about diminished self-belief during an active championship fight. The fact that Russell acknowledged this mental hurdle makes his subsequent 1:11, 5007 lap significantly more impressive than a standard qualifying result. He had to overcome internal doubt before he could overcome the McLarens on track. Sky Sports described this period as a tough end to the first half of the year, which validates the severity of that slump. A DNF followed immediately by a distant 7th place creates a compounding negative feedback loop. Engineers start questioning setup directions while drivers begin second-guessing braking points. Doubt crept in, momentum stalled, reset required. How does a driver break that specific cycle when the next event is a high-speed sprint format with zero margin for error? The answer appears to be circuit familiarity acting as a stabilizing force. Russell explicitly told Formula 1, calm, that Zandvoort is a circuit he really loves. That emotional connection to the venue may have provided the foundation that raw data couldn't offer during his difficult stretch. When mechanical grip feels uncertain and championship pressure mounts, returning to a favored track can restore instinctive driving rhythms. This contrasts sharply with the sterile environment of simulator work between Belgium and Hungary. Real asphalt and genuine G-forces at a beloved venue recalibrate sensory inputs that screens cannot replicate. The Rays treated this pole as a genuine bounce-back story rather than just another statistical entry. They recognize that ending a personal drought matters differently than extending a winning streak. What we still lack is confirmation of whether Mercedes adjusted the car specifically to rebuild his comfort level. No verified setup changes exist in the research to explain the SQ3 improvement mechanically. This forces us to consider that the primary variable was entirely human rather than aerodynamic. Perhaps the team simply allowed him extra running in SQ1 and SQ2 to rebuild rhythm without chasing times. That operational patience would align perfectly with his stated need for commitment at this particular circuit. It also explains why he didn't set benchmark laps early despite having competitive machinery. Building confidence takes precedence over positioning when your mental state is fragile. The AO part 041 second gap to Norris then becomes a measure of restored belief rather than pure velocity. Antonelli's floor damage in SQ1 shows how quickly physical issues compound existing problems. Russell avoided such setbacks but faced an invisible barrier that required equal precision to navigate. His third sprint pole of the 2026 season now carries narrative weight beyond the 8 points available to the sprint race winner. It signals to Hamilton and Antonelli that their teammate has resolved whatever internal conflict caused his mid-season slide. Whether that resolution stems from engineering solutions or personal breakthrough remains the open question driving our analysis forward. The timing sheets show recovery. The method behind it stays deliberately obscured. Remember how this all started. George Russell's 1:11, 567 lap in SQ3 at Zandvoort beat Lando Norris by exactly 0.04 of a second to claim sprint pole, a specific claim that now looks even more significant when you examine the wreckage left behind by his teammate. Championship leader Kimi Antonelli finished roughly 0.2 behind in P5 with a 1:11, 794, a deficit directly traced to floor damage sustained during an SQ1 excursion at the penultimate corner. That single mistake created a cascading failure that no amount of driver talent could overcome in the remaining segments. While Russell was carefully building confidence through SQ1 and SQ2 without chasing benchmark times, Antonelli was fighting a compromised aerodynamic platform from the very first session. The penultimate corner at Zandvoort is unforgiving because it feeds directly onto the main straight where downforce efficiency determines top speed. Damaging the floor there doesn't just hurt cornering grip, it destroys the entire airflow structure underneath the car for every subsequent sector. Damage spread instantly, pace vanished completely, title hopes dented. This is where the story splits into two parallel narratives that explain why the Mercedes garage produced such asymmetric results. We established earlier that Russell admitted his confidence wasn't exactly at its highest before the session began. Yet he had a fully functional car to rebuild that belief incrementally. Antonelli had neither luxury. He entered SQ2 and SQ3 knowing his machinery was fundamentally broken relative to its potential. 227-second gap between teammates therefore represents mechanical loss rather than pure driving disparity. In a championship where Antonelli leads, but Hamilton sits only 50 points back in second, losing 2/10, in qualifying translates directly to starting position vulnerability. Russell's pole puts him at the front for the sprint race start, while Antonelli begins from P5. With 8 points awarded to the sprint winner and title rivals like Hamilton starting further back in P7, this grid separation creates immediate strategic consequences. Sky Sports emphasized that both Antonelli and Hamilton were on the back foot relative to Russell's pole. That framing ignores the crucial nuance that Antonelli's disadvantage was structural rather than competitive. So what does this mean for our original question about what made Russell's lap so different? It suggests that part of his advantage was simply the absence of catastrophe. His late session surge wasn't just about finding extra pace, it was about executing cleanly while his teammate managed degradation.